Do you know who won the metric system wars? The French did. In case you were confused, there actually have been quite a few wars over the metric system. But before we get into those wacky freedom units, let us rewind the clock to World War II, when Britain found itself in a bit of a pickle. The year is 1932. Hitler has just taken power, and the threat of war is looming larger than ever. A few years later, it would kick off. And in the midst of all this tension, the British needed a way to keep their communications secure. Enter the Enigma machine, a device capable of encrypting messages so that only the intended recipient could read them. It's a sophisticated piece of technology, like a typewriter that produces gibberish unless you have the correct key. Basically, if you didn't have the key, the encoded messages looked totally random. And because they changed every day, the codes couldn't be cracked simply by trying every combination. In response to this new encryption challenge, the British government tasked one of their best code breakers, Alan Turing, with figuring out how to crack these encrypted messages. He took on the task with the help of a team of mathematicians and engineers. What followed was a race against time, where every day the stakes were higher and the consequences of failure could be dire. By 1937, German U-boats were already using the Enigma machine, making the Atlantic a dangerous place for supply ships. And after the war began in 1939, the need to decipher Enigma grew even more urgent. You see, Enigma was considered unbreakable by most. Many people thought its advanced encryption techniques made it impossible to crack. But Turing had other ideas. After studying Enigma's inner workings, he designed a machine called the bomb, which could test thousands of potential keys and settings in mere seconds, something that would have taken a human operator days to do. This innovation gave the Allies an advantage in the war, as Turing and his team successfully decoded German communications. They gained insights into enemy plans, movements, and strategies. Their work helped the Allies make better decisions, ultimately contributing to victories in key battles and operations. But here's the thing, they did all this without telling anyone. For security reasons, the full extent of their work remained classified for decades. While historians now estimate that Turing's efforts likely shortened the war by 2 years, saving countless lives, his contributions weren't widely recognized until long after the war ended. In fact, he was prosecuted for homosexuality in 1952 and died in 1954 at the age of 41. However, his legacy continued to live on in the field of computer science. Many consider him the father of theoretical computer science and artificial intelligence. His work paved the way for modern encryption algorithms and the development of electronic computers. Even during the war, he was already thinking about creating machines that could learn and adapt, laying some of the earliest groundwork for AI research. Now that we've covered some of his amazing accomplishments, it's time to answer the age-old question. Did the French win the metric system wars? The answer is kind of complicated because there have actually been several wars involving the metric system. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Let me introduce you to the two main contenders in this bizarre battle of units. On one side, you've got the metric system, a measurement system based on absolutes and mathematical relationships. In contrast, on the other side, we have the imperial system, a quirky mix of units inherited from various civilizations throughout history. So why were these systems at war? Well, it wasn't exactly a traditional battle. You wouldn't see soldiers marching or weapons being brandished. Instead, this was a war of adoption. Different countries were choosing sides and gradually incorporating these measurement systems into everyday life. The French were particularly zealous about the metric system, viewing it as a symbol of the nation's intellectual prowess. During the French Revolution, they went all in, adopting it as the official system in 1799. They created a committee to oversee its use and came up with catchy names for each unit to make it more appealing to the public. Meanwhile, the British were slow to jump on the metric bandwagon. Despite metric's growing popularity around the world, they stuck with their tried and true imperial units, This resistance was partly due to tradition, but also because the British Empire spanned so many different regions. Getting everyone on board seemed like an insurmountable challenge. It wasn't until the 20th century that Britain officially adopted the metric system, although even today you can find remnants of imperial units in everyday life. This isn't the only clash between metric and imperial. During the American Revolution, the newly formed United States found themselves in need of a measurement system. Naturally, they turned to the British, but as tensions ran high, the British refused to share their units. Unable to measure supplies and trade, the Americans decided to switch to metric. This decision was solidified in 1866 when the U.S. adopted the metric system alongside imperial. There was also the metric system wars of the 1870s, a period when anti-metric sentiment flared up in the United States. Fueled by a fear of losing American identity, opponents of metric actively lobbied against its use. It wasn't until President Kennedy challenged the U.S. to join the global metric community in the 60s that things started to shift. Now you might be wondering, did the metric system really take over the world? Not entirely. There are still holdouts such as Myanmar, Liberia, and the United States. These nations either never switched or chose to stick with imperial for various reasons. The United States, for example, has been reluctant to fully embrace the metric system despite numerous acts of Congress promoting its use. This reluctance is often rooted in tradition and concerns about the cost of converting to a new system. It is also important to acknowledge that some countries use a combination of both metric and imperial units depending on the context. Australia is a prime example. Although Australia adopted the metric system in 1960, it remains one of the few countries that uses imperial units for certain purposes. For instance, the legal system still uses imperial units such as pounds and inches, while the rest of the population predominantly uses metric. So to answer the question, did the French win the metric system wars? It depends on what you consider winning. If you're talking about widespread adoption, then yes. The metric system has become the de facto standard for most of the world. However, if you're looking at complete and total victory, then the answer is no. Pockets of resistance remain, especially in the United States, where imperial units stubbornly persist. It's almost like the quirky, hard-to-convert units are waging a rearguard action against the standardizing forces of the modern world, at least for now. So who shot Lincoln's assassin? John Wilkes Booth was shot by a civilian while trying to escape after assassinating Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. In a shocking turn of events, an African-American man named Lincoln's second cousin, Robert Lincoln, was present at the Ford's Theater performance when Booth entered and fired upon the president. But it was another man who ended Booth's life. That person was a former actor named John Henry Swart, who was also a member of the Confederacy. Swart and his accomplices planned to kidnap President Lincoln, but when the plan fell through, Booth took matters into his own hands. When the group met up after the assassination, they were all arrested except for Swart, who escaped to Canada. Eventually, Swart returned to the United States and was captured. He was charged with conspiracy to assassinate the president and became the first person to ever stand trial for such a crime. However, Swart was acquitted due to lack of evidence. According to historians, this decision was likely influenced by the fact that he was half black himself. During the Civil War, Lincoln had worked to end slavery and ensure equal rights for African Americans. So it was likely that the jury did not want to convict someone who had helped further Lincoln's goals. As for Robert Lincoln, he survived the assassination attempt and went on to live a long life. He died in 1926 at the age of 83, having witnessed the turbulent times of the Civil War and Reconstruction firsthand. Swart, on the other hand, spent the rest of his life trying to clear his name. He lived in obscurity until his death in 1916 at the age of 74. Both Lincoln and Swart left behind complex legacies. Lincoln is remembered as one of the greatest presidents in American history, While Swords' role in the events surrounding the Civil War remains a matter of debate among historians. So what's your take on this intriguing episode from the past? Feel free to share your thoughts, theories, or any additional information you might have. Thanks for joining us on this journey through time. Don't forget to stay tuned for more captivating historical tales. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.